Welcome to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting challenging issues, fascinating people, and important events in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. With us in our studio is a man who has walked across the breadth of Northwest Indiana, resurrected the art of the South Shore posters, interviewed hundreds of notable people from our region, and nurtured a forest of walnut trees for the past 4 decades. I call him Northwest Indiana's greatest advocate and champion. Let's meet and talk with John Davies. John, you actually wear a lot of hats and have a lot of roles here in this region, don't you?
Thank you for being so generous in your introduction. I'm not sure it's entirely accurate, but it's wonderful to hear.
Well, that's the whole point of the show, is me trying to prove that I was accurate with that by telling people how fascinating you are, and you're going to just verify that for everybody that's watching.
Well, if anything, I'm going to remind myself and all of us what a wonderful place we live in here in Northwest Indiana.
Well, why do you think that? And I introduced you as the greatest cheerleader. I truly believe you are the greatest cheerleader for Northwest Indiana, because you just believe so deeply in how good and rich and important this place is. Why is that?
Well, there are many people today, and most importantly, many leaders today, and I'm not sure I count myself among them, but many, many people who champion Northwest Indiana. But when I came here in 1987, by choice, I made the decision shortly after I came here that I was going to celebrate this region, because I was surrounded with so many naysayers. And I knew that the future of the region belonged to a more positive outlook on the part of all of us who live here.
Now, when you said you came here in 1987, you returned here because you were born here, right?
I was actually born in Washington, D.C., but raised in Northwest Indiana for most of my life, and through career changes found myself in Memphis, Tennessee.
But you left, everybody talks about the brain drain. And so back when, I'll have to ask you, okay, what year did you graduate high school?
It was in the late 50s or early 60s.
Okay, so when you did that, you went off to seek your fortune too. You went away, right?
Not quite.
Okay.
When I was in my second year of college, I had chosen a college in Illinois, and it was a very successful experience for me, but I was very lonely for Northwest Indiana. And at that point, I made the decision to return, and ultimately I graduated from Valparaiso University, went into the service, and began my life's work.
Okay. So you went to the Marines too, right?
I was into the Marines.
Because I know you're proud of going into the Marines.
I'm extremely proud of having served my country, and I think all of us need to feel that sense of pride in service to country and to others.
So when you came back then, you spent some time working in other parts of the country, in Tennessee and some other areas, correct?
I worked all over the country, primarily in the Midwest and the North and the Northeast. And through job changes, I found myself working in Memphis, Tennessee, and I loved it. I loved traveling across 14 states in the so-called Cotton Belt, and I had a critically important job at that point, and I was fortunate enough to be successful, but I felt the need to return to my family farm.
So you wanted to come back?
I wanted to come back, and did come back.
Okay.
I just didn't pull up stakes with my family and return. We strategically located a position in Northwest Indiana, and then made the move back. And
see, I like to point this out to people because we talk so often about the brain drain, and I think part of this is a natural process that younger people go off. They go to the service, they go to school, they go and kind of do other things, but what's important is that they return to us. because they had that feeling of wanting to be back home, and you had that feeling. Why do you think you had that feeling and others don't?
Well, I disagree with that.
Okay.
I believe that my children, Kelly and Jennifer lives in Chicago, works in Northwest Indiana. Kelly lives in Washington, D.C. But I believe those children have, now adults, have that same passion for this place. If there's one thing, and I've had the great privilege of speaking to graduates of, or about to be graduates of Leadership Northwest Indiana, as you well know, each graduating class, and I talk about the power of place. I think it's important that young people, if they so choose, leave the region, but at some point they're going to want to return and be a part of shaping Northwest Indiana into the community that it can be. When I returned, I was so, and you mentioned this, I was so excited about being back in Northwest Indiana that I said, what could I do that no one else has done that is new and different that would celebrate Northwest Indiana? So I decided to racewalk actually 65 miles across this great region. And I saw the most beautiful things, and I also saw things that needed to be changed. But out of that came the South Shore poster campaign.
What gave you that idea to walk across the region? I mean, what?
Well, this is very interesting to me. It is not just enough to champion the region. You must find a way to make it a community activity. And so maybe it was instinctive, but I chose to link my employer with celebrating Northwest Indiana. So I launched, with the help of the Post-Tribune, the Celebrate Northwest Indiana Walk, and we did it for 4 consecutive years. And my employer was Our Lady of Mercy Hospital, and Our Lady of Mercy Hospital, with a little help, had a marketing position as a wellness center, and so health walking was certainly a great way to build the brand of that hospital.
So you tied this whole thing to, it was kind of an employment thing, a vision
yes.
for doing
and this was a paradigm shift at that time because it was thought to be a radical act. But instinctively, I knew if I could not just get people to walk with me, but organizations like the Post-Tribune and the Northwest Indiana Forum and so many others to get on board, that we could create momentum behind what we now call regionality.
Do you think sometimes some of the things you've done are radical acts?
At the time, they were considered radical acts. I will never forget the CEO of one of the major organizations, and I won't be more specific, who came up to me after the Celebrate Northwest Indiana Walk, and he said to me, I thought this was the most foolish activity I had ever seen. But what it did, it tied communities to one another, it tied counties to one another, and it created a sense that we are better together.
You know, you've always done things that make people think about what's around them. What drives you to do that? Well,
I'm not sure this answer will satisfy you, but I think if you had the great privilege that I had, and I was fortunate to have a wonderful childhood, and when I returned to the farm, we were in the midst of a transformation of planting 7-inch saplings, 14,000 of them, of which the primary crop were walnut trees. And to see those trees grow to be giants of the forest ties you to the land in a way that I think for me was singular. And so when I say I love Northwest Indiana, I love Grinnewellen Farm, I love Porter County, I love all of Northwest Indiana, and I'm committed to making that which needs to be changed even better. But my contribution is much smaller compared to the contributions of many other people. But my point is, this is what I set out to do in 1987, and I've stayed with it.
I want to challenge you a little bit here on this. You said your contribution is not as important as other people, but one of the things that you do is you are terrific at finding people who've made important contributions and shining a light on those people, putting them under a magnifying glass, exposing them to the rest of the region. That seems to be really important. Do you think it is?
I think we appropriately focus on the great natural assets of Northwest Indiana, but we don't focus enough on the great and the talented people in Northwest Indiana. Through my work with others in the Society of Innovators, I must tell you, I am inspired every time I talk with people who have thought outside the box, who have come up with a new and different idea, who are changing their world and our world. And it's important that we know they are doing important work.
But you know what's, I said in the intro, you've interviewed and talked to hundreds of people. You've not only done this through the Society of Innovators for over 10 years, you did this through the Small Business Development Center and some of the awards we gave to entrepreneurs. You did this through the Wall of Legends. You've done this through the poster series. You've done this through the talk show you did on what's right with the region. You've done this through your articles in the paper where you focused on people. You've done this over and over again with people. Out of all those times, pick one of the most fascinating, because I know you would tell me there's been dozens of them. Tell me one of the most fascinating people you've interviewed.
Well, I would respond in two ways. I would tell you, because I've just experienced it, that the most fascinating person I just interviewed is the last interview that I did. It's so hard to select an individual because each has a unique gift or a unique story to tell.
So tell me about the last one, because you're right. This is like my daughter, when I used to take her, and you've met my daughter before, used to take her and she goes, the last movie we saw was the best movie I ever saw, until she saw the next one. And I think that's why you've been with people. Every one is fascinating to you. But tell me about one of the most recent ones you
let me respond to your question, because I do want to tell you of an interview that has remained with me, and I think it will remain with me always.
Okay.
And it was with Ralph Braun. Ralph Braun has passed, but Ralph Braun at an early age had a disability that left him paralyzed, right? Paralyzed. But he was determined not to be the ward of someone. He was determined to enjoy independence. And so he found a way through innovation, through innovative actions, to create a lift that will allow someone in a wheelchair to enter a ramp, to go into a vehicle, in and out of a vehicle. He was named, before he passed, a White House hero. And sitting with this man for 2 hours and interviewing him was an amazing experience. He happens to be one of those legendary people, I assure you, in the disability industry, because 4 continents are benefiting from the lifts that he created from his own
And this is a business down in Winnemac,
This
right?
is a business in Pulaski County in
Okay.
Winnemac. But I want to emphasize, everyone has within them creativity and innovation. We've got to find a way to unlock that.
What touched you about the conversation with him in that 2 hours? What touched you?
His courage. That he would not accept the status quo. And he was determined to find a way. And what he did was, he remembered seeing a lift on the back of a pickup truck that lifted up and put down a barrel of oil. We've all seen them, particularly in our early years. And he took that concept and he connected it with his own experience, and he had bought a used post office Jeep, and he connected he soldered it and he put it together. He was able to get in and crawl and get into the driver's seat, and it had an automatic transmission. He was able to drive, and he's just a sheer determination.
I've seen you many times interview these people, and I heard you talk about them. What excites you so much about talking to these people? Why do you love so much interviewing these people?
Because we tend to look at the heroes, and rightfully so, that we all recognize, the Washingtons, the Jeffersons, the Adams, the Martin Luther Kings, and we need to look at the amazing people that are within our midst. And once you inspire them to do even more, then you begin to see a movement occur. And what I've been trying to do as my small part is to encourage people to lift their eyes higher, to think more broadly, and to discover in their own journey of discovery some way they can make their own unique contribution.
I tell you this all the time. I think you're an inspiring speaker. Why don't you do more speaking about just your own stories and what you've learned?
Well, I think first and foremost, I have a very busy job that takes all of my time. I pride myself on my work ethic. I'm the son of an immigrant, and I have much work to do and not enough time to do it all. But if given the opportunity, like I had in May of this year, I spoke, it was called The Starry Messenger, and I spoke about a man who made a difference 400 years ago, and I pulled it forward, and the speech was pretty well received.
I think you do a great job. In all the years you've done these things, John, is there, besides the interview with Ralph, has there been one thing that's kind of really stood out to you that you've done that you're like, man, I just think this was so important that I did this?
I think that's for history and others to make that determination.
So what has been one of them that has just felt like, gosh, that seemed important to have done?
Well, I love the fact that one day I walked by one of the original 1920s South Shore posters, and that sparked the idea that maybe I could do it all over again. And I think when you walk into a building or a business and you see these nearly 100 modern day South Shore posters, I think that says something about that idea. I'm not so sure it says so much about me, but it says something about the fact that we celebrate the region in which we live. I don't know of any other region in the world that has its own series of posters that's been going on since 1925.
We're down a couple minutes here, but I want to ask two questions, so I'll get a little piece from you on each one of these. You know, I know sometimes you take some criticism for going, oh my gosh, here comes John with another crazy idea. How do you deal with the critics who just sometimes go, that's crazy?
I never give up. If I feel strongly about something, I will continue to pursue it. Now, if it is clear that I'm not going to be successful, I will back up and find another way forward. It is important that people never give up, that they continue to find a way to move forward and to take their community with them.
I was going to ask you a question. Do you ever give up? And I know you answered the question. You never give up. We need more positive people in this region, more people who advocate and cheerlead like you do. How do we develop more John Davies?
Well, thank you for that. I kind of see myself as maybe the exclamation mark on positive things. But I need to say this. It is important that we recognize the work that we have to do. It is important that we not only embrace the positives, but that we meet the challenges, and that we must do this together. Now, this is where leadership bears, and the work that you're doing in Leadership Northwest Indiana. It is hard to be a leader sometimes, but sometimes it is absolutely essential that leaders rise.
I appreciate your leadership, and I know you and I have had this debate several times where you say, I'm not sure I'm a leader, but John, you are definitely a leader and somebody we are proud to have here. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. There's a story about a newcomer that visits the local stylist and during his first haircut asks, I'm new in town and wonder what the people are like around here. The stylist responds with, what were they like where you came from? Oh, they were mean, nasty liars, backstabbers, and cheats, he answered. Well, I think you'll find people here just the same. A second newcomer arrives at the same business and repeats the question. Again, the reply of, what were they like where you lived before? Oh my, wonderful people, loving, caring, hardworking folk who would give you the shirt off their back. The stylist smiles and says, you're going to discover they're exactly the same here. How do we manage to live in the same region and hear some people say, this is a great place, beautiful lakes, festivals, nice communities, friendly people, a place to call home, when others will jump in with, this place is the armpit of the nation, nothing to do, no place to go, dull, boring, dead. My parents taught me to understand that you get what you expect. If you look at the world through dirty glasses, all you will see is filth. I know that most people do not see the good in their own communities, yet it is so interesting to find people who visit or move here just love the place. They find fun things to do, fascinating places to visit, love their neighbors, enjoy the shops and eateries. They feel that it is a terrific spot to raise a family and want to have their friends and family visit. You cannot change how other people think or feel, but you can help them see and understand the good that's all around. Talk about your favorite places. Tell them about what you enjoy. Point to the positive aspects of our region. The quality of life in any region is tied closely to the perceptions of those living there. Gently and kindly reach over, remove their glasses, and wipe off that grime. There. Now you can see better. After watching the show, what do you think about Northwest Indiana and the people who live here? We want to hear from you. Send us an email with your thoughts to focus@lakeshorepublicmedia.org or comment through our website, both listed on your screen. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.